For 3 decades, from 1962 to 1992, one man held a unique and powerful position in American culture. He wasn't a politician or a titan of industry, but every weeknight he commanded the nation's attention. For 30 years, Johnny Carson was the undisputed king of late night. His reign on NBC's The Tonight Show wasn't just a television program. It was a national ritual, a shared experience that tucked America into bed. From his iconic desk in Burbank, California, he welcomed a dazzling array of guests into America's living rooms. Movie stars promoting their latest blockbuster, legendary musicians sharing a new song, and up-and-coming comedians hoping for their big break. A spot on Carson's couch was the pinnacle of success. Even world leaders and influential politicians sought his audience, understanding that a conversation with Johnny was a direct line to the heart of the country. He was an absolute master of his craft. Armed with a lightning-quick wit and an effortless Midwestern charm, Carson possessed the uncanny ability to connect with anyone. He could draw out a shy actor, gently spar with a confident celebrity, and calm even the most nervous first-time guest, making them feel like the most interesting person in the world. But behind that cool, calm, and collected exterior was a fiercely private man and a meticulous perfectionist who took the job deadly seriously. To the millions watching at home, the show felt spontaneous and relaxed. In reality, it was anything but. The Tonight Show was a finely tuned machine, a complex production with countless moving parts. And Johnny was its chief engineer and conductor. He was intimately involved in every aspect, from the monologue jokes to the guest list. On air, he conducted the orchestra, pacing segments down to the second, instinctively knowing when to let a moment breathe, and when to move on to the next commercial. But every so often, a guest would throw a wrench in the works. Whether through ego, nerves, or a simple lack of awareness, they would derail the show's delicate rhythm, creating awkward silences, uncomfortable confrontations, and the wrong kind of memorable television. For a host who valued preparation and control above all else, those nights were more than just bad television. They were personal affronts. They became subtle battles of will, played out in real time before millions of viewers who could sense the shift in the air, even if they couldn't pinpoint why. Today, we're pulling back the curtain, drawing from interviews, biographies, and accounts from those who knew him best. We're counting down the 5 types of guests who, according to producers, crew members, and sometimes Johnny himself, were guaranteed to get under his skin. From the spotlight hogs who tried to take over the show, to the utterly unprepared who wasted precious airtime, these are the stories of the people who tested the patience of a television icon and pushed the king to his absolute limit. Much of this is anecdotal, pieced together from the collective memory of an era. But taken together, it paints a fascinating and deeply human picture of the man behind the most famous desk in television history. So settle in, because this is a side of The Tonight Show you've never seen before. The stories behind the smiles, the tension beneath the laughter, and the guests who Johnny Carson reportedly couldn't stand. And now, our countdown begins. To understand Johnny Carson's genius, you have to understand his relationship with control. It wasn't about ego or tyranny, but about the delicate touch of a conductor wielding a baton. He was the master of conversational rhythm, the keeper of comedic timing, the steward of the audience's nightly escape. Every segment was meticulously planned, from pre-interviews that unearthed conversational gems to the precise timing of commercial breaks. Johnny's job was to orchestrate these elements into a seamless, entertaining whole. The unspoken agreement was simple. He guided, you followed, and together, you made magic. The show was a dance, and Johnny always led. But what happened when a guest refused to dance? When they tried to hijack the orchestra? The delicate balance of the entire broadcast would shatter. Some guests, whether driven by ego, nerves, or simply a misunderstanding of the format, wanted to lead. They arrived not for a conversation, but for a coronation, turning the collaborative art of the interview into a one-person show. The signs were unmistakable. They'd talk over Johnny, steamrolling his setups. They'd ignore his carefully crafted questions, launching into pre-rehearsed anecdotes that had little to do with the topic at hand. Worst of all, they'd filibuster, blowing past the meticulously timed breaks that were the lifeblood of the show's pacing and commercial obligations. In the control room, producers would watch the clock with mounting anxiety. And on stage, you could see Johnny's internal calculus shift. The engaged, curious host would vanish, replaced by a man enduring a situation. The telltale signs would appear: the lean back, the tight, polite smile, the steepled hands resting on his chest. It was the physical manifestation of a host who had checked out. This could happen even with guests he deeply admired. He revered his friend and mentor Bob Hope, but Hope's machine gun style of joke delivery sometimes turned the interview into a monologue, leaving Johnny a mere spectator on his own stage. The legendary Orson Welles was another prime example. A masterful storyteller, Welles could captivate an audience with his booming voice and grand pronouncements. But he dominated the air so completely that Johnny could only nod along, losing the crucial back and forth he excelled at. The interview became a lecture, and the magic of shared discovery was lost. Johnny would always try to reclaim the rhythm. He'd attempt a pointed question to break the monologue, or a deft, self-deprecating joke to reset the tone, light, professional touches to regain the helm. But if those attempts were ignored, he'd employ his final, most devastating strategy: retreat. He would physically lean away, cede the floor, and give the guest all the rope they wanted. In doing so, he let the audience feel the difference between a charming conversation and an awkward, self-indulgent filibuster. For millions of Americans, The Tonight Show was a nightly ritual, a comfortable armchair at the end of a long day. Domineering guests shattered that relaxed end-of-day ease, replacing it with a palpable tension that radiated through the screen. It was never about ego. Johnny was famously generous, often giving guests the best lines and setting them up for success. It was about the unwritten rules of the medium, a social contract. The host facilitates. The guest plays along. The show was bigger than any one person on stage. When that pact broke, the entire enterprise faltered. You could almost see Johnny mentally counting down the seconds, wishing for the sweet relief of the next commercial break. Coming in at number 5 on our list, stage hogs. Next up, a type of guest who brought a different kind of disruption to Johnny's stage. At number 4, political firebrands. Coming in at number 4, the political firebrands. Johnny Carson may have broadcast from the heart of Hollywood, but his sensibilities were pure Nebraska. He saw his audience not as a collection of demographics or voting blocks, but as neighbors. People from all walks of life, across the entire country, who had put in a long day and just wanted to share a laugh before turning in. The Tonight Show was conceived as a national campfire, a place where the day's anxieties could be set aside. His audience was broad, united by the simple, powerful act of laughter, not by political affiliation. For that 1 hour, the divisions of the day were meant to dissolve under the warm glow of the studio lights. People weren't tuning in for a civics lesson or a cable news shouting match. The Tonight Show was designed as an escape, not a lecture. It was a signal that the workday was over and the time for argument had passed. So when a guest arrived with a heavy political agenda, you could feel the atmosphere shift. These guests, often passionate and deeply committed to their cause, would drag the light-hearted energy of the room into a partisan gravity well. The air would grow thick with talking points and policy debates. It was divisive, not entertaining. Johnny understood that his primary role wasn't that of a hard-hitting journalist grilling a source. He was an entertainer, a host there to delight and disarm. His job was to make his guests, and by extension the audience, feel comfortable. When a guest veered into a stump speech, you'd see the subtle shift in his technique. The questions would become shorter, more direct, designed to steer the conversation back to neutral ground. His eyes would flick to the cue cards, or to the clock, searching for a clean off-ramp into the next commercial. It was a masterful, non-confrontational display of control. Of course, some guests were simply too big to ignore. Presidential candidates, prominent activists, leaders of major social movements. The booking team knew the risks. Pre-interviews would be conducted with surgical precision, attempting to pivot the conversation toward human stories, personal anecdotes, anything but the stump speech. They'd try to find the person behind the politics, but sometimes the coaching just didn't take. Once the lights were on and the camera was live, the guest would revert to their platform, addressing the camera as if it were a rally. The air in the studio would get heavy, splitting the room between supportive nods and the quiet, collective sigh of remotes clicking away across the nation. Johnny felt some guests used his show not for a genuine exchange, but as a broadcast platform to deliver a monologue. He respected deeply held convictions, but not at 11:35 on a Tuesday night when America just wanted to unwind. Afterward, he'd be visibly annoyed. In his eyes, the segment had failed because the guest refused to play the unspoken game of The Tonight Show. To him, it felt like someone tracking mud across his living room carpet. It violated his Midwestern sense of hospitality, the implicit agreement that you respect the host's house. He fiercely protected his brand and his audience. And for that reason, political firebrands who treated his couch as a soapbox were always the least welcome guests. In Hollywood, attention is currency. Johnny believed in professionalism, not antics. He could spot a stunt a mile away, and you could see the weary resignation in his eyes, the rehearsed cry for camera time, the phony feud, the bizarre stunt designed to go viral before viral existed. He was a host, not a ringmaster for ego circus acts. Producers begged guests to be normal and warned Johnny when a stunt was coming. To viewers, a scoop. To Johnny, cheap tabloid bait that dead-ends the conversation. He prized wit, charm, and genuine stories. Respect for the audience's intelligence. After the shock, there's nowhere to go, leaving Johnny to mop up the mess. A good guest helps the host. A bad guest creates problems. Johnny had little patience for the latter. No. 3. Attention seekers. Next. No. 2. Combative comedians. For stand-ups, Carson's stage was the big leagues, and Johnny could make a career overnight. He supported comics generously, but expected tight sets, not format-breaking metagames. A few tried to out-joke Johnny mid-set, a catastrophic misread. Outswim a shark. Johnny's timing could end a heckle with a glance. These rare moments froze the room and left the comic alone under hot lights. Worse than combative? Unready comics who bomb. 8 minutes can feel eternal. He'd been there himself, compassionate on air, but it made for terrible television. He never humiliated a struggler, but many didn't get a return invite. Johnny protected the show's rhythm and authority. Combative or bombing, both broke the pact of professionalism. It was the majors. If you couldn't hit the curveball, you went back down. Number 2, combative comedians. And number 1, the cardinal sin, chronically unprepared guests. More than nerves, unpreparedness infuriated Johnny. It signaled disrespect. A black hole of conversation. Yes. No. It was fine. Suddenly he had to be interviewer and interviewee. Exhausting for him, boring for viewers. Producers heard great stories off camera. Then on air, the guest clammed up. His look said it all. You told me this person could talk. He could spin gold from his own life, but inside it was a frantic scramble. Worst when they had something to sell, free national promo, and no story to spark interest. Staff even groaned about certain regular culprits. Prep them all you want. Nothing landed. Johnny loved guests brimming with curiosity, ready to riff, not recite. Compared to combative or bombing, unprepared guests forced Johnny to work twice as hard for half the result. For a man who revered craft, showing up with nothing was the unforgivable sin. For 3 decades, Johnny was the calm center of late night, a cultural institution and trusted friend. He demanded professionalism, preparation, and respect, because that's how you keep the magic. These 5 types tested his control and patience, but they don't define his legacy. His true legacy is the thousands of sublime moments, and the late-night standard still followed today. When a host deftly saves an awkward moment, they're borrowing a move from the king. Thanks for watching.